Hi, I'm Jeannette Sutton,
And I am Eddie Bertola.
and we welcome you to another episode of The Alerting Authority. And as always, we encourage you to subscribe, follow, listen, and most importantly, participate in these podcasts. We want your questions, concerns, ideas, problems, pain points, and success stories so we, as alerting authorities, can better do our jobs and make our community safer.
Yeah, thank you for listening. And we want to thank our valuable sponsors. HQE is sponsoring this episode. They're a disabled, veteran owned, and full service solutions provider. Um, they're an IPAWS approved alert origination software provider as well. And they have specialized cutting edge life safety and electronic security solutions. They're able to make premium emergency and security technologies accessible to you and to me to help our diverse communities and organizations. One thing that makes them unique is their unified mass notification approach. It means all of your outdoor sirens, your indoor notifications, any electronic mass notifications that you send can all be integrated into one software. And that just makes it easier for all of us and helps us reduce our pain points. So thank you.
So, our guest today, Dan Vasquez, has worked in local government for nearly 2 decades. Most recently, Dan was with Human Resources Equity, Diversity, and Inclusion Division, but has just recently taken on a new role as Technology Manager for Public Safety, overseeing the coordination of innovation and technological solutions for 10 departments. Previously, he drove strategic planning and operations at the county's Office of Emergency Services from 2017 to 2023, including experience as their alert and warning coordinator. Dan has served in over 20 EOC activations ranging from locally proclaimed to federally declared disasters. Prior to his county service, Dan served in various public safety roles within the city of Del Mar, and Dan enjoys volunteering, including mentorship programs, and holds leadership roles in several county employee-led nonprofits. Dan, we are really happy to have you. Welcome to the Alerting Authority.
I'm I'm excited to be here. I feel honored. You all have had some pretty big names come through here in the last few months. So I hope that I don't let folks down.
Not a chance. I'm so excited to see
No.
you and to talk with you. It's going to be great.
And I know we talk about this often because we have had some pretty cool people and we have great locations that they work at. But this is stinking San Diego. Why are we not doing this in person on the beach? This is our bad. Like
Yeah,
we've
I
We
agree.
should
got
be.
to
I
fix
agree.
this. So if you're a sponsor out there that wants to sponsor us to be able to fly, sit on the beach and talk, just let us know. There's gotta be one. Um, but Dan, so to open it up, I kind of have a two-part question. And one is specific kind of with your bio, because we all have our bios and resumes. But if you could let us know a little bit more of how you got into your role as the alert and warning coordinator for San Diego County OEM. But then part two, which is, I think, pretty unique to your area, is the fact that San Diego OEM partners differently than a lot of other areas where you guys are organized under a disaster council and that unified disaster council approach. So if you don't mind hitting at first a little bit about how you got to be where you are, and then kind of explain to everybody what's going on in San Diego.
Yeah, so my career trajectory has been just a series of um, being in the right place at the right time. And I'll use an example is I moved down to San Diego from Los Angeles, about 20 years ago. I was like, I need a job. And I was touring the beach and I saw the lifeguards there and I was like, that looks like a really cool job. Let me go talk to them and see if, I could come in. And they said, sure, come on in. Like, come on in for an interview. So I started working with the lifeguards. Then going to school for criminal justice was like, I want to be a peace officer. So went through the academy, and then they had this like perfect timed scenario where they were toying with the idea of creating their own little police department in the city. And so I became a beach officer through their park ranger division, and went through EMT school. Well, as you can imagine, working at the beach, let's say it's winter, let's say it's raining, there's not a whole lot of stuff going on. And so my partner at the time was doing an online course of emergency management and asked if I would start quizzing him. And I started, reading up on the topic, had never heard of it. And lo and behold, I was like, this is really cool. Maybe I should go to school for emergency management. So I went and got my master's in emergency management and was coming to the end of it and decided, well, now I need a job in emergency management. I'm going to throw out a bunch of emails to, different local governments. And the county of San Diego responded, said, come on in for an interview. We don't have any paid spots, but if you want to intern here, sure. So I started interning there, and 3 months later, a spot opened up. So I, slotted right in as an emergency service coordinator. And from there, I just really started learning a lot about, our region and the makeup of things. Um, and, you know, uh, just a few months into being there, we actually had a pretty large wildfire. It was federally declared, and I was in the Joint Information Center supporting kind of the social media unit, and I was getting able to kind of see everything going on with alert and warning. And the team, Office of Emergency Services, actually at the time, this is 2017, issued their first wireless emergency alert countywide. And so it was a big deal, right? Everyone was, excited about this. It was a huge accomplishment. They had the tools. They had never, done this before. And so I was like, you know what? That's what I want to do. And lo and behold, I became the alert and warning coordinator. So that's kind of the little bit of background on how I even got into emergency management. But, yeah, San Diego is really unique. So the state of California actually has an Emergency Services Act. So it's part of their law, right? And it says in there that a city or a county or county, cities and county can create something called a local disaster council. And what this is essentially just a governing body of the local governing bodies that agree to have emergency preparedness, right? And so they come together and will formulate what are the plans for the region, right? What are the different systems that are going to be used? And so dating all the way back to like the late 70s, San Diego went in on this and created what they call the Unified Disaster Council. And it's a joint powers agreement, and it's between 18 cities and the county, right? So 19 organizations are signatories on this. And to just for folks that understand how difficult it is to get jurisdictions to sign off on something, the most recent update or amendment that they did, and I think it was like 2004, 2005, it took 20 months to get all the signatures and all the city councils to vote and approve it, and then it go back to our local elected for them to approve it, and it kind of become law locally. And so this local disaster council, they have different subcommittees, one of which is alert and warning, right? So I'm sure I'll talk about that. I don't want to bore people to death, but they go into funding, right? So there's a budget, and it's like 50% funded by the county, 50% funded by the cities, and then the makeup of it has to do with population and the assessed value of property. And what's really cool is then money comes into this disaster council to pay for regional projects, including our alert and warning software. And so, from my personal perspective, I really think San Diego has done a phenomenal job in this because our region is really diverse. I mean, we've got parts of San Diego in the city where just 10 blocks, you'll have over 100 languages being spoken, right? We've got the largest land border crossing in the U.S. We have over 100,000 people crossing our border every single day, right? We've got the beaches, we've got valleys, we've got mountains, we've got the desert. I've done this. I've literally gone and played in the snow and then gone and surfed in the exact same day, right? We've got more. This was crazy to me to hear that the San Diego County actually has more tribal nations than any other county in the country, right? And so we're just extremely diverse. And a part of that, I think, really requires that interjurisdictional coordination, which we have through that disaster council.
So I mean, obviously that's a lot of partners. Are there any best practices for trying to coordinate alerts and warnings? Because I think we could point to different examples that have happened recently and some in the past where you have a county who has the ability to send out alerts and warnings, and you have jurisdictions within, and there can be conflict. And again, it's not intentional, and we're not saying that
Mhm.
anything ever is in this area, but intentional or not, it can create that conflict and that misunderstanding, information not going where it needs to. How do you guys work around that? And it's does every jurisdiction or partner have access to the same like operating system, anti-pause? Do they have access to your stuff? How does it work?
Yeah. And in San Diego, we didn't always give everyone access to everything, right? It was a definitely an evolution. Um, just as wireless emergency alerts were evolving, we were trying to keep up on the governance side of it. And so really it's always been about relationships. San Diego has had our fair share of really, really bad events. 2003, 2007, we had wildfires that just, for a very long time held state records for largest and costliest and most deadly. And so from those in, the early 2000s, our emergency managers, our, utilities, fire, law enforcement, they all came together and realized that it's the relationships that are going to make or break a disaster response and recovery process. And so coming together, we've got, I mentioned the Unified Disaster Council. There's subcommittees, multiple subcommittees, including, the alert and warning. We have an evacuation working group. We've got emergency manager working groups. We have an access and functional needs working group. And so, getting the right stakeholders to the table way ahead of disaster, I think has really, truly put San Diego in a position where something like this works. And so bringing everybody to the table, we decided we needed a memorandum of agreement, right? Yes, we have the Joint Powers Authority that says we're going to govern ourselves in emergency management space. But when it comes to alert and warning, like we knew we needed something concrete in writing that everyone agreed upon. And it defines the systems. It outlines the policy, right? When to use it, when not to use it, when is the emergency alert system broadcast authorized to use in the region? When is a wireless emergency alert? When is our, community emergency notification system, right? The opt-in piece of it, right? Websites, social media, all of that is outlined in this memorandum of agreement. And then on top of that, it even outlines what the communication expectations are going to be for the jurisdictions, right? So what is that expectation going to be for your neighboring city or the county or the public, right? And we cover being multimodal and ensuring that we're using the appropriate tools for the size and scope of the disaster. I mean, it covers training, security, access, and and I will tell you, this is one of the biggest selling points that helped and get this MOA across the finish line with these cities is we had our attorneys, our council put in with their city attorneys this kind of defense and indemnification piece, and that really, I think, sold it for the electeds, essentially saying, hey, if something goes wrong, like and it was the city, that it was in the city's jurisdiction, then the county's got your back. Like we're gonna go through this together. And if something happened and it was in the county's jurisdiction, the city's gonna have the county's back, and we're gonna go through this together. And I think that really sold a lot of folks into going into some like formal agreement through this. But to your question, how many, does everybody have access to everything? I just checked with the current alert and warning coordinator about a week ago. 192 public safety professionals have access to send a WEA today. That is a lot of people. Um, yeah, when I heard that number, I was thinking, I was like, maybe almost 100, but almost 200 folks can send that out to the communities, all through the same system, right? And we have different, guiding. Everybody's got a plan, right? And we have different plans, including, communication and warning systems, annex within our emergency operations plan. One that's specifically for emergency communication, and these are all adopted and approved by that disaster council and then the elected body that we have here in San Diego.
Wow. Wow. I think,
I,
is that
I'm
appropriate to say wow?
I think so. I am positive that there are some people who are listening to this thinking like, how do I do that? All of the things you just described, the amount of effort that must have been required and the time and investment to get everyone on the same page, to get everyone in agreement. And it doesn't even sound like they have to be identical agreements or identical documents. It's just you have to agree that each place has their document and understand how each jurisdiction is going to approach this topic. So you have, and it takes away the mystery of it. Like you don't wonder, oh, what's my neighbor going to do this time? It's
Correct.
because
Yeah.
you practiced together, you trained, you've come together and had create these agreements and like just tremendous effort. And I know in just a minute Eddie's going to ask you, we have our questions in front of us, of course, for the audiences listening. Eddie's going to ask you a question about training because that is the next question. I'm sure people are like, how did you train 190 people? But before we get there, I want to go back a little bit in history. Because as we were planning for this conversation, you told me a little bit about those earliest days when, in 2017, when you guys sent the first wireless emergency alert. That meant that it was 90 characters long. We hadn't moved to WEA 2.0 or WEA 3.0 yet. But San Diego had already created a plan and a process and even defined what the message would look like for that 90 character message. And then things changed over time. But like, can you talk to us about that first message? Like, how did you guys figure it out? Because there was no real guidance out there yet. Like, but you did it.
Yeah. When that message went out, it was what the National Weather Service was telling us was a purple flag Santa Ana wind event. And so for those that are familiar with, the Santa Ana winds, east winds, the Diablos, whatever your area calls them, sometimes you get a red flag warning. And that means that the winds, the humidity, the temperature, right, all the conditions are just ripe for critical fire danger, to a point where, if any fire starts, it is going to be really bad and difficult to contain. So that's a red flag warning. And we were told that, on this December set of days, that it would be unprecedented and they were going to call it a purple flag warning. And so we activated our emergency operations center just because of the event. Like there was no active disaster, but because we were in a posturing just in case, we were ready for that. And when a fire did kick off, it was bad and it was fast. I mean, within an hour, it had already burned through from where it started on the side of the freeway up through 100 homes, just lightning quick. And so, sending out this wireless emergency alert, again, 90 characters, it was basically, there are fires going on right now in like the northern part of the county, like turn to media. And that's pretty much it, right? And to your point, there was no guidance on how to do things. But from that, we had a few lessons learned. And we kind of, and I don't know where this came from because I wasn't the alert and warning coordinator at this exact moment yet. But we built out a wireless emergency alert request form on a piece of paper. And it essentially had 5 things that we were telling people what they needed to do. They needed to say who's sending the message, right? You're all familiar with this. It's sounding really familiar. What's happening? Where is it happening? What you want them to do about it? And then where they can go for more information, right? So it's a little different than I think what the current standard is, but we had this as a new request tool because at the time, only two entities had access to send a wireless emergency alert, and that was the County Office of Emergency Services and the Sheriff Communication Center, which is actually housed just on top of the second floor of our EOC. And so, we're real excited. We put this out. The Sheriff's Department thought it was so cool. They decided to build their own mobile app, right? So they called it the ART mobile app. It was the alert request tool. It's literally just a digital version of the paper form with 90 little boxes that someone could go in and T-Rex type a message. They click the send. It would get sent automatically to the Sheriff Comm Center and OES so that we can go ahead and type it into the system and send it out. And then we heard WEA 2.0 is coming. We're going to get 360 characters. And, I will tell you, when you get really good at sending a 90 character message, 360 characters feels like an essay. Like you just have all the space in the world to really formulate what this is, and putting like clickable URLs and stuff. And so we updated the form. We now created an area for 90 little boxes and an area for 360 boxes. And, we trained the jurisdictions on, hey, here's your form. If you need to send this out, you got to, put it in, you got to sign it. Who's the responsible, authority, take a picture of it, whatever, send it in, and we'll go ahead and disseminate that. And then right around the time WEA 3.0 was being proposed or was kind of on the horizon, which was allegedly to reduce the bleed over down to 1/10 of a mile, that's when we started having the conversation of updating the memorandum of agreement to give jurisdictions access. We figured, hey, because at the time, right before the 1/10 of a mile, the idea was if you send a wireless emergency alert, it's going to the whole county. Like that's what you should expect, is that it's like an emergency alert system broadcast. Just expect it to go everywhere. But when they were talking about the 1/10 of a mile, we're immediately like, let's give folks access. Let's update the memorandum of agreement. Little did we know that the testing of 1/10 of a mile, I think to this day, is still not quite where it needs to be. But, one of those things that we all work through. And so, we updated that memorandum of agreement and we just removing the red tape, right? So if you figure filling out a paper form, scanning it, sending it to someone who then have to transcribe it into the system to then send it out, and then the whole back and forth of, is this the right location? Did you mean, and there's a real example, did you mean a 1 mile radius or a 1 mile diameter? Because we have had issues in that space, right? And so just removing that red tape and giving people access. But I will tell you, and we'll get into the training piece, but that was hard. Like it was hard to convince folks to take on that level of responsibility, right? Like if I'm a city, you're really going to have to convince me, why am I going to, accept this level of responsibility if the county is already doing it for me? And so we'll get in that in a little bit, but yeah, I'll pause there.
Okay. I, it's it's so interesting to hear from the organizations that started with WEA way back when, and hearing your challenges and your growth over time. And I'm really curious to learn more about the organization's reluctance to accept that responsibility. I suspect that part of it is not having to uh, be the one who says, yeah, that was my message. But, we've heard so many times from emergency managers that one of their biggest pain points is thinking about what happened in Hawaii with the false alert that went out. And like, if you don't have to be responsible for pushing the button, then, it's a little less pressure. So removing that from the county and kind of distributing it across all of the other jurisdictions, I could see why, if that was one of the reasons that they were like, we don't want to do this, I could see part of it, why, but giving them some control would also be to their benefit, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
No, I'm a big fan of trying to empower locals to take care of their local jurisdiction, but it has to be done correctly. Like, we don't just want to give them keys to the fastest car in the world and say, good luck to you, right? Which leads to the big T word of training, because you have 190 plus people who have access to this system. That that is a huge number. However, I know you probably have a plan in place to deal with that. And to have to say you have a training plan is probably oversimplifying. And so I'd like to know, what's the training approach for San Diego County? Um, and who gets trained? Is it just the people that push the button? Or, are there others? What do you teach them? And how do you just make sure that you, as much as possible, can get everybody ready so when the time comes for them to send the message, that, like, the phrases that we use here a lot, right? That they're confident because they're competent at it.
For you mentioned the Hawaii piece, and I want to just talk about that one for just a second, because
Mhm.
that one kind of hits close to home. And I I was in college at the time. I was living with a family in this beach little town, right? Renting a room, and I'm in the kitchen one day, and the lady that I was renting from comes in the room, in the kitchen. She's just bawling her eyes out on the phone. And she gets off the phone and she's like, my mom and dad are bunkered in their bathroom, hiding in the tub. They just called to tell me goodbye because there's a missile coming. And oh my God, goosebumps. And so,
Mhm.
like, that, for me, when I would go out and train folks, like, I would always bring up screenshots of, the missile incident in Hawaii, because it just felt so real, that the impact that getting it wrong has on folks, right? It's not just hey, sorry, we sent out a bad message, right? Like, people were literally calling loved ones, telling them goodbye. Like, like, that is heavy stuff that
Mhm.
comes with that type of responsibility when you have the authority to press that button. And so I would actually start that with a lot of my training spiels, and but it's and for those that you know push the button, right, are they they know how difficult it can be, right? It's not some easy, hey, there's a disaster, go ahead and send the message.
Mhm.
People are going to get the message, and then people are going to be safe because they took action. Like, no, there's like 20 steps to all of that, right? There's the disaster, then there's the decision to send the message, then you have to craft it, get approval and the reviews, and then you send it and you hope that the system is functioning the way it needs to. And even with all the WEA tests that the FCC and FEMA and even local jurisdictions do, like, we're lucky if 80% of your intended, audience, like, if all the cell towers are working, you're lucky if 80% of them are going to get the message. And then you're going to have this offshoot of a bunch of people that weren't even in an alerting area, and they still get the message, right? And then when the people that were supposed to get the message got the message, do they understand the message, right? Because everyone interprets information differently. So even if you've followed all the best practices on how to formulate their message, does that person, is it accessible to them, right? Can they comprehend it? And then even if all of the stars have aligned, are they going to take action, right? We have a lot of wildfires here in San Diego, and there are a lot of communities who, a wildfire will start, they will get an evacuation order, it's time to go. And they'll say, we had one of these last week. We're going to write it out. We're fine. Right. And I hear the same thing in the South. I mean, my aunt lives in Florida. Hey, hurricane is coming. Right. And you have people who are like, yeah, I know. I'm going to write it out. I'll be all right. So you have to have all the stars align for this piece of it. And that just goes then to the training piece, so that people understand that, just because you've crafted a good message and you sent a good message doesn't mean that it's going to equate to this end result that I think is sometimes ideated in like after action reports, right? And so all of this really, from when I was doing it, was part of my sales pitch to folks, right? Um, and again, I mentioned the county used to have the responsibility, and now we're trying to get the cities to say yes. And so we used to do these road shows where we would physically just go out in person. They still do it, by the way. I don't say we used to. I used to. The team still does these, and they go out. They meet the jurisdictions where they are. If it's the local police department communication center, and I'm not kidding here. And they're like, yeah, our shift turnover is at 10 p.m. Cool. We'll be there at 10 p.m. and we'll catch them at the end of their shift, and we'll catch the new people at the beginning of their shift so that we don't have to, really, strategize on using overtime, right? Because these folks have a job to do, right? And this is just one component of that. So we were just being as flexible as possible, meeting people where they were. We built out, very detailed, standard operating procedures with screenshots, diagrams. We built out these little like top 10 fact sheet about WEAs that they could put on their terminals, at the dispatch center. We would do virtual refreshers. And when we contracted with our new system, the one that we have today, we actually wrote into the statement of work that the contractor would come in at the beginning and do a train the trainer for all of our, local jurisdiction administrators, essentially like our sub administrators for the system, so that they would be empowered to also train their own folks. And then annually, telling that contractor that part of this agreement is you're going to come back down here and you're going to do refresher trainings, right? So just trying to have as many opportunities and just be super flexible so that, jurisdictions felt comfortable, right? You mentioned, the competence level in the comfort of doing something. Um, and it's, ultimately it's up to the jurisdiction, how seriously they want to take it and how they want to prioritize it for their communities. And part of those memorandum of agreements as a fail-safe, right? The county will always be there for our local incorporated cities. The sheriff's department will always be there to support. And the state of California, the warning center does an incredible job working with counties and the operational areas of they're there to support us too, right? So if we're having issues with our system, we could always request them to use their system. Um, yeah, I think that's kind of how we approach training here in San Diego.
I mean, I love it. Training is not easy. And the fact that you guys not only have a plan, but you're meeting people where they are, like that's the way to do it. It'd be nice if everybody would just self-initiate, right? And be like, well, hey, Dan, I haven't been to training in 6 months. Where can I fit in your schedule? Right? You need to make it very doable. And that's one thing that I know we've talked about with other agencies is I have done a lot of graveyard training, right? Where I have actually trained people at 2 in the morning or 3 in the morning because that's the window that's available. And
Yeah.
how else are they going to get trained? My favorite's when they get asked to stay late after shift. So they've been up all night long. They're off at like 7 a.m. and the training starts at 8:30. And you walk in and you're trying to be peppy and you just see this whole back row of people that are in a zombie mode. But I mean, you give them grace. Like they've been up all night working, but we just assume, right, that bad word, that they'll be fine for training. So I'm really grateful that you guys have done that and adjusted.
Mhm. Mhm.
Um, so I think I just have one more, and I know Jeanette's got another question for you, but we as really just one of the channels. Like we've talked about it a lot today, but for everybody listening, that is not the only way that information gets pushed out. It has its limitations, it has its strengths, but it's not a one and done if you need to get information out to people. You just like, hey, let's do a WEA and we're done. Um, it's a wonderful, powerful tool, but it's in a toolbox with a lot of other tools. And so I'd love to just let you kind of open up the toolbox and tell us how do you guys find it best to reach people in your community? And then if you want to talk about partner relay.
Yeah. I'm extremely passionate about the, emergency communications and risk communications piece, mostly for emphasizing accessibility, right? And you just had Vance Taylor on not too long ago. Vance is an amazing resource that has, been available to, us locally in California, but throughout the nation, right? Just the subject matter expert for planning with people, with disabilities and other access and functional needs. And so in 2018, yeah, I think 2018, San Diego, or not San Diego, but California as a whole had just a really bad fire season, right? The campfire, there was stuff up, in the Bay Area. We had stuff, Santa Barbara area, LA, and the state did an audit the following year. And this is what really got me, I think, passionate and I'll go into how I got involved with the partner relay. It was titled something to the effect of California is not adequately prepared to protect its most vulnerable, population during disasters. And, I read that multiple times and I was like, took it to my leadership. I was like, hey, we need to really focus on what these findings are, because now that this is out, we can't allow it to be us, right? We got lucky, right? We got lucky that other, jurisdictions were under the microscope on this one. But what's to say that we would have, done differently or better, especially in this, the accessible piece of communication. And so kind of in parallel to that, the county has an Office of Public Health. And back in 2013, they actually coordinated with emergency services to do this survey for multilingual communities. And they picked 8 different kind of languages, and they had basically, an all-day forum where they brought community members together that spoke that language, right? They had all the interpreters there, and they just talked to them about what are your community strengths? What are the community areas that you need extra government support with? How do you feel about the government, right? A lot of refugees come from, countries, they have a huge distrust for the government, right? And so what we really learned a lot in the diversity in what people are looking for when it comes to public health information and emergencies and disaster information. And so from that, they started this partner relay program, which essentially was finding trusted messengers in the community, sharing information with them so that they could not just translate it and push it out to their communities, but to also receive feedback, this two-way dialogue, so that, if they were a part of, a place of worship, their congregation or whatnot can come to them with questions or, hey, we're not quite understanding what this guidance means. Those trusted messengers can come back to the county. We could work with them to clarify, and they can then push that message back out, right? And so it's not this immediate, wireless emergency alert, but it is through this trusted mechanism that really gets people the information they need in a way that they can understand and therefore then take action. And it actually worked decently well in that lilac fire I mentioned in 2017 in San Diego that I was a part of. It was also used in, we had a hepatitis A outbreak in the city around 2019, which I think really put us in a really good position for when COVID happened the following year, in which they were also used, right? Giving them those, public health instructions on how to mitigate the spread of COVID and then pushing that out. And so, Partner Relay, as of today, it's got hundreds of different organizations that are a part of it and, that we're able to share messaging with. And even during an emergency operation center, like an activation during a disaster, we have a specific seat in our joint information center that is that link for that two-way dialogue back to the communities. And so that's one way, right, that we get right back out to the community with that. But we also have, a mobile app, an Alert San Diego mobile app, which is also tied into our opt-in system coined Alert San Diego. We have a website that then, we could put in updates. So, there's, no limit to the amount of characters we could put up on the website. And these incident updates, there's an option where we can do a push notification to folks' phones that have downloaded the app. And then lastly, we have our vendors application as well for when those alert and warning pieces get pushed out.
I think that's fantastic. I get asked so frequently, how do we reach populations that are not English speaking? Do we use AI? And I'm always really resistant. Like, well, we in emergency management, we need to think of the whole community approach. And what you were describing with Partner Relay is bringing the whole community into the process of preparing your community, commu- creating outreach opportunities, and connecting with people who are really hard to reach. And I love that you're using human beings to do that. And it's again time and resource intensive, and San Diego's really invested there. And I think sometimes the wondering if the AI is the right way to go, it's kind of a shortcut, but it's a little scary. It's not yet totally demonstrated, so got a little ways to go. You probably hear about it in your work with law, which is the last thing I wanted to ask you about, which is law is LAAWW for people who are not familiar with the acronym, and it's Language Alerts and Accessibility and Alerts Working Group. Say it, Dan.
Language accessibility and alert
Accessibility
and warning work group.
Work group. Yes, yes. So law, and it's been around for a little while. I've gotten an opportunity to talk with you guys once or twice, but can you tell people what it is and why it's so important that they know about law, especially if they're concerned about these communication problems that this group is trying to solve at a national level?
Yeah, so shameless plug, I'm the vice chair this year of law, so the language accessibility alert and warning work group. We've got over 300 organizations that are a part of this now. We're not a nonprofit. It's just a group of people who are passionate about accessibility and alert and warning, and we're putting them together. And really, that's all we're trying to do. Like, regardless of the language, someone's, if they have a disability, if they don't, whatever their background is, everyone deserves that equal access to emergency alerts during a disaster. And, right, if you can't access it, then you can't take action on it, right? And that comes with language, right? Not being able to read something or comprehend it is access. And so what we do is we get together monthly. We bring in guest speakers. They talk about different research they're doing. A lot of researchers come in and use this group as sounding boards, getting ideas, asking what they're doing locally. And we share information. If anyone wants to join, they could, and I don't know if in the comments after this we could put it or whatnot, but it's
We'll put a banner underneath you right now while you're talking about it.
perfect.
So
So
go
we
for it.
created a tiny URL to make it super easy. So tinyurl.com/join LAAWW. So tinyurl.com/join law. And that'll take you to the Google Sites page that we have, right? Again, it's there's no membership fee. It's just this free group of people coming together to talk about it. And we're actually doing our first summit this year on May 14th. And what we're going to do is have kind of a plenary session, and then we're going to have breakout sessions based on the alerting software. So we'll have, part of our, community of alert originators come together that all use that same platform and have discussions on accessibility using those platforms. These will all be recorded, right? So if you can't make it, so I think we have like 6 different softwares. We did a survey to see kind of what are the top ones throughout the nation of our membership. And then our intent, and they haven't said yes yet, but we hope, is in recording these, we'll then share them with the vendors and ask the vendors to come in the following month for a panel discussion to really talk about what they heard and how either, pros, cons of the systems can help influence the roadmap for these vendors. So yeah, I just really excited about it, right? So we could always use more members.
And do you want to announce when and where it is again?
Yeah, so it's all virtual. And so our summit will be on May 14th and it'll be virtual through the day.
That's fantastic. I'm excited to find out to learn about your findings from that. I hope that there's some really creative things that are happening. I'm sure that your members are doing things. We always take technologies and adapt them to help to meet the needs that we're seeing in front of us. And I'm sure they'll share some very interesting ways. I suspect they might share some things that are a little frustrating. So that'll be interesting if you can get some of those vendors to come and listen. But what a great way to help them to hear directly from people who are really focused in this area on accessibility. So, Dan, it's been really great talking with you. And I think you've brought us so much history, information about organizing and thinking about how to put together these processes to bring together 190 people from across a huge county to be unified in their approaches to alerts and warnings. So just thank you. Do you have any concluding thoughts that you wanted to provide?
Thanks for having me. I really appreciate it. And, for all the listeners, um, I know, what I shared could sound daunting, right? There's a lot to unpack there with policies and governance, but you got to start somewhere, right? Just, little bit at a time. I mentioned that one of those agreements took 20 months to actually come to fruition, right? Between the partner relay starting in 2013 and then us finally getting like a really smooth functioning process through later disasters, 5, 10 years down the line. Like none of this stuff happens overnight, but if you don't start somewhere, you're never going to get to that desired end state. And the three things I want to really put out to folks is what is the accuracy of your message, what is the timeliness, and is it accessible, right? Those three things, I think, if you take, it's like the golden triangle, right? If you take any one of those away, you've failed the community. And so make sure that it has all of those components to it, and just it's not easy, so keep up the great work. It's important work. And if you're ever in San Diego, reach out.
We will. Thanks so much, Dan. It was great having you.
Thank you. And if anybody wants a copy of any of your like policies or annex to use, are you guys available to like share?
A lot of our stuff is publicly facing, so I would be
Beautiful.
happy to link and or send stuff if people request it.
Perfect. So
Great.
thank you so much. And I know we'll be talking to you soon.
Yeah. Thank
Bye,
you.
everybody.
That was such a great conversation. I loved hearing what Dan had to say. He has this historical knowledge of wireless emergency alerts, which I think really helps for people who are newer to alerting to understand what it was like back in 2017 and earlier. WEA got launched in 2012. We should find somebody who was part of 2012 WEA. I'm sure they'd have some stories to share. Oh, was it you, Eddie? Were you
We
part
were
of the
all a
2012?
part of that. Yeah, no, I'm grateful for where we are now.
A lot of growing pains and
Oh,
changes that have been made to improve the ability of WEAs to go out and to be the longer WEAs, the 360 character WEAs. I mean, it's just so grateful that DHS invested money in doing research by scholars, academic researchers, led by Dennis Milletti and a team of researchers out of University of Maryland, where we investigated the effectiveness of those 90 character messages, and they were not great. So it's one of the reasons that we always encourage, if you're writing a WEA, to write the 360 character one, because 95% of phones today can receive the 360 character message. So you're just getting a small portion of people who still have those phones that only receive the 90 character messages. And it's like writing a book, like he said, like when you have that many characters, you can really get in a lot of information. And it's very surprising how specific you can get in a message when you use all of the characters. But
I tell you,
I had a couple of following points that I wanted to emphasize that he made at the very end of his talk. He said three things, and he didn't talk about this earlier, but he emphasized it at the end. He said access, accessibility, and timeliness are the three pillars that you need to put your warnings on top of. I think he actually said three legs of the stool.
the golden
But there,
triangle.
truly, if you remove one of those legs, your stool is going to fall over. So your message has to be timely. You need to get it out as quickly as possible, which means training, writing templates ahead of time, figuring out how to get things approved before you're hoping to find the right person to approve things. That timeliness is all based upon those decisions ahead of time. Um, Accuracy of the message. And that's kind of in battle with the timeliness, because if you're trying to get information out really quickly, you cannot sacrifice the accuracy of your information in order to get a message out in a timely manner. That accurate information is what your trust is built on. People need to truly believe that you're giving them information that they can act on. And then the third pillar, the third leg of the stool, was accessibility, which I loved that he talked about the partner relay, the law working group, and other strategies to improve your accessible alerts and warnings. And those are things that I hope that our listeners will go and look up the law working group, LAAWW, and learn more about it so you can improve your own accessibility within your alert and warning program.
No, and I like what he mentioned too, where he kind of gave everybody a little hope that he knows that this is a lot and they've
Yeah.
come a long way. And if you're just starting, I know Jeanette, you and I have talked to people who are struggling, who are that one or two person operation, or even if they have more, but they just feel like the whole world is on their shoulders and they're not sure what step to take.
Yeah.
And so the whole idea is you just take a step and then tomorrow you take another step and just make it a consistent pattern of growth and just keep trying to improve little by little. You can get to what San Diego's doing. It's just going to take time. So be prepared for that, but then also be open to talking with people like him or others. You can talk to us to help you get there. But don't feel discouraged, and you're definitely not alone.
That's right. And we just today, on the day that we're recording this podcast, which is Friday the 13th, we completed our first inaugural boot camp training program where we had students from across the United States joining us. Some starting very early because this is the week that we changed to daylight savings
Oh, I
time.
know. Oh,
So they were up at starting
early.
at 7 a.m., but it was still dark in Seattle. We had a great, great training week, and I saw people improve their ability to write messages, just grow dramatically. Their confidence was just beyond my expectations by the end. And we're looking forward to offering additional boot camps in the future and other training opportunities. And the Alerting Authority does trainings. We also do message audits and template reviews. Um, Eddie, your experience of writing policies and helping organizations with their policies is unmatched. And so that's one more thing that we can offer to organizations that are trying to figure out how do we improve. And we want to be there to provide those resources to you as alerting authorities.
And I got to throw out a teacher highlight because Jeanette led the work group and the boot camp was amazing. And I would say one of the highlights for me was a message that one of the students wrote that we actually didn't even get to read during class. And it was from a student that I would say would identify herself as someone that is learning, that feels like, again, everything is on her shoulders, and so much of it was new. And her journey from Monday to the Friday, I know when I saw the message, I was just like, oh my goodness, like that is 100% what we're looking for. And I don't know if you
Absolutely.
wanted to comment. I mean, you're the professor, so
Oh, it was fantastic. We were seeing some really amazing messages that fit within the different channels that they were writing for. We were writing for WEA, we were writing for SMS, we were writing for email. We were taking into consideration audible messaging, and thinking about where's the research to support all of this. And they wrote messages for all kinds of hazards. And today, we focused on missing persons alerts, which are not easy to write. But boy, they knocked it out of the park. And it was just outstanding to see how taking a standard and systematic approach to writing messages makes it so easy to write something that is going to be effective because that effectiveness is based in the research. And I'm just really, really proud of the work that we did this week.
100%. And that right there is why we do what we do.
Yep.
So thank you for listening today. I hope you want to join the next boot camp, and I'm sure you can look on the War Room to see when the next one is going to be. I'm sure we'll announce it here as well. There are more in the works. Thank you to those who participated because you're that much more prepared. We here at the Alerting Authority believe that every second has a story, and it's our pleasure to be here to help share yours.